everyone, Annie here from Stamp Anything, and today we're going to take you through the steps of coloring Anthony, friend and me, as we put him in a scene that is reminiscent of Toy Story. So we're starting with our skin combination, and we're just laying down our E04 and then our E11. And I always do my body parts first and then my face. So next we're going to do our E21. And then we're going to follow up with our E00. And then finally our E000. And then you'll have the base of the first layer of the skin for his neck and his hands. And I always do two layers of my coloring, so we just repeat it again with that E04 laying in those dark shadows. And then using our E11, going over that E04 and extending it out a little bit further. And you always want to go over the past colors that you were using to get a nice blend. Then our E21, followed by that E00, and once again with our E000. And now his hands and his neck will be complete, and we can begin starting on his facial area using the same combination of markers. So he has little tiny ears, and then with our E04 we are just going to be putting in a light line in the folds under his hairline where the shadows would be hitting, and then down the side of his face. And then with our E11, we're going to go over the lines we just made, but then extending it out a little bit further. And it's important, again, to go over that E04 with this E11 so that the blend will start to meld together, because the E04 is a much darker color than the E11. And if you just laid it up beside it, then you're going to have this harsh line. So you always want to just go over it so you get a nice transition of those two colors. Okay. So that is our E11. And then I'm also just going to start going around the rim of his eye, also with that E11. Just to help me keep the whiteness of his eyes cleaner when I get to that point. Now with our E21, we're going to go over those last two color lines and extend it out further again. And you're just going to be continuing this process of laying down these colors and extending it out further and further to get a nice smooth transition. And going around the rim of the eyes as well. And now we're going to go in with our E00. And now we're going to color in a slightly larger section of the face as well, because he does have a bigger area than what was on the arms and the neck. So you need to pull those colors down further because it's a much larger area. So we're just bringing it down further, and now we're also going to go around the bottom part of the eyes into the cheek area towards the mouth. Again, this is all with our E00 marker. And then with our E000, we're going to blend out the E00 and fill in the rest of the face area. And your image is going to look a little blotchy. That's because you're only on the first layer, and you need to do the second layer so that they all blend better for you. Now I'm taking an R20 and I'm just adding a little bit of a pinkish color into his cheeks. I go around side of the partially side of the face and then underneath the eyes for his cheeks. And then I'm going to take my triple zero rather, and I'm going to flush out and fan out the harshness of that R20 on his cheeks. And now we start the whole process all over again. So back with that EO4, putting in those darkest shadow lines. And you already know where they go because you've already done this layer, so you're just copying pretty much what you've already laid down. Now we're taking our E11, again, going over that EO4 again and extending it out further. And coloring really is just about repetition and building up the layers. And I had forgotten to do the rim of the eye with that E11, so I'm just doing that really quick. And now I'm going to go grab my E21 and adding in that next layer. And I am blending it out underneath that hairline and down the side of his face. And then that little bit of the rim around his eye. Now I'm going to go in with my E00. A bigger area of the forehead that we have to cover here. And we want it to be a nice smooth transition. And then our E000, blending it all out and together. And now you should see that the layer that you're doing now is a lot less blotchy than that first layer when we've added that E000. And then we're going to go back in with that R20. Add a little bit of that pink to his cheeks just so he gets a cute little pinkish. Even though he's a boy, he can still have those little pink areas on his cheek. And then we're going to blend that out with that E000. And you just want to make sure that your transition lines are blending smoothly, so you're just going to have to self-adjust. So I'm just self-adjusting my colors to where I think I needed a little bit more of a darker shade. And then I'm just wanting to accent those cheeks even a little bit more, so I'm putting on a third layer of that R20. And then again, we just want to smooth everything out. To get a really nice smooth complexion on our little boy Anthony here. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we are going to move into his hair. So we're using E77, E71, E70, and then E79 for our darkest points. So I'm starting with my E77. I never start with my darkest color. I start with my second darkest, so I can always go back and self-correct and add those dark shadows. I do place my cut image on a piece of post-it tape or washi tape to hold him down, and then as you can see, I turn my coloring a lot when I color. This is just how I do it because I like to be able to sometimes flick towards me, flicks away from me. It just is whatever you're most comfortable with. So you'll see that I do turn my paper a lot when I color. So again, this is that E77, and I'm just putting in darker areas of where the shadows and the roots of his hair are going to be. So all underneath that hat rim and then up by his sideburns. Now I'm going to go in with the E71, and I'm just going to extend that E77 color down further. And this is also why I like doing 2 layers, because if I find that my coloring does not have enough contrast in it, that is when I can go back and add an even darker color for my shadow area. And that's why I don't use my darkest color as my first color, because it helps me just better gauge where I want those shadows to be. So now I'm with my E70. And now I'm going to be able to go in with that E79 to add a lot more contrast in those dark areas. And that's a personal choice. There are some people who like to have more of the light highlight showing with white in their coloring. I do not normally leave any white in my coloring. I like to use the markers. So I tend to just keep self-correcting, like I said, and going back in with a darker color to add that contrast, and then fix the transition areas, and that's how I like to do my coloring. But it's all personal preference. If you like the softer look, you don't have to add the darker color like I'm doing. You could have just used your E77, 71, and 70. But I just like contrast in the coloring. So now that I put down my E79, I'm going to go back for my second layering and start it again with my E77. And now this time I can extend off of that E79 so I can bring the colors even closer together towards the middle, because I felt there was too much of a gap in the highlights and the shadows with my first layer. So that is why I'm going in again. Now I'm taking my E71, and again I'm just extending, going over what we've already laid down. And then we're going to finish it up with our E71 to sort of smooth out all of those colors. And you can see I go over all of the layers because I like them to meld so that there's not like a harsh line in between the colors. And then back with that E79 just to hit those dark areas once again to really darken it up. And especially now that I have those the gaps smaller. So I just want to make sure that the shadows are working in the area that I put them in. So that's with our E79. And then I'm just going to do a really quick once over again with that E70 to soften those E79 ends. And then we will have our perfect little Woody hair. Okay, now we're going to start on Woody's hat. So we're still using E's. I mean, all we've used so far are our E color markers, but you can see there is a large range in the colors of our E's. You have the lighter ones for skin tones, then you have, more of a chocolate brown, you have a rusty brown. There's so many different colors in your E family. So I am doing this hat now using E18, E17, and E13. The first color I put down, I did not record because I ended up not using it, which was E08. I didn't like how it blended out. So my first color I'm using is E18. extending it into E17, and then I'm going to finish it off with E13. Because Woody's hat is more of a caramelly brown in the contrast to what his hair is, which is a nice chocolate brown. So we wanted to make sure that we got these different E's in here. And so we're just coloring in this hat, with the highlight would be more towards the center. You do have to work the E13 into your E17 blend because there is a big jump in the number there. But you just have to keep going over and over it just to blend it out and get a smoother transition. And that will come to you on your second layer when you do it. So here we are again, going in now with an E19 just to get that contrast, like I said, a very small area. And now we're going in with our E18. And then again, our 17 and our 13. And just work it a little bit harder, and then you're going to get a much smoother transition. And you can see you got the shadows in the edges and a lighter highlight spot in the center. And now we're just going to use the same color combination, and we're going to start doing the sides of his hat. So in with that E18, and we're coming in from the back side of his hat, because that's where the shadow would be, around his hairline. And then because the hat bows in the center, that little curve, you would have a shadow there as well. So that's why there's the dark areas there. And then the part that is flipped up out is going to be your lightest area. So that E18, E17, and now that E13 for that lightest area up on the side of the hat. And you can see by my coloring just now, that E17 to E13, you can see there's a big gap in the color. And that is why you just have to go over it twice, because it's not a very smooth transition. So back with that E18, darkening in those areas. Then with your E17, extending it out further. The E18 and the 17 are going to blend really nice together. You just want that little cusp of the hat to be left for your E13. And you're just going to scrub it near where the two colors meet to really blend them out. So you do have to, again, work that color a little bit harder because there is that jump in numbers. And then you should have a really nice smooth transition and a nice shadowy area with the highlight on the side. Okay. And in a moment here, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same exact thing on the opposite side of his hat. Okay. Sorry, I believe I had a phone call and that's why, and I forgot to edit out of the video here. Okay, so back to the coloring. Sorry about that. Back with our E18. In those dark areas. Down near the back side of the hat, and then underneath where the hat bows in the front. And then your E17. And then that little tip of the hat that's bowing out to the side is your E13. And again, you can see the transition on this first layer. There's a big gap. And that's why we're going to do more blending, and we're going to do that second coat because then your paper is saturated with the ink, and it'll make the blend a much smoother transition. And you can watch it as it basically disappears as you are blending on your own paper. If you're interested, we use hammer mill paper, the digital copy in the 100-pound. I believe it has the tree frog on the cover of the paper pack. It's got a really nice smooth texture to it. It doesn't have your colors bleed out. It does bleed to the opposite side of your page, which is how you know that it is a good quality paper. And you can get it off of Amazon. I actually buy it in reams at a time because I go through tons of paper for my coloring. And it's not an expensive paper compared to other ones on the market. Okay, so now that we have his hat done, we are going to go ahead and we're going to do his boots. And his boots are the exact same color combination that we just did on the hat. So you're just going to lay down that E18 down the sides and around the bottom part of his shoe, of his boot rather. And that will be where we're going to have the shadow coming from. And then we're going to go in with our E17, going over the E18 and extending it out a little bit further. Do that on both boots. And then with our E13, we are going to complete the boot where we are having the highlighty part showing up. Because this is a smaller area than the hat, you don't have to work the blend as much as you did in the hat. And you should be able to notice that in your coloring as you're going along. Smaller areas are going to take less to, actually work the marker into the fibers of the paper than the larger areas. But once you get this first layer done for his boots, we're going to go ahead still, even though the blend is a lot better, we're still going to go ahead and add the second layer of color. So back with our E18. Then into our E17. And then finally, after this E17 blend, we are going to take our E13 and just hit the edges, blending it out. Sorry, that was my husband trying to show me something. And now our E13. For that highlight. Okay, so now we're just going to hit up like the soles of his boots. I just took a random dark brown. I believe actually it was either my E77 or that E79. And I'm just coloring in the sole parts of his boot. I believe that was the E79 actually. And then I also did the little, I guess you can call it the rim on the top of his boot. No shadowing, just one simple color just to finish off the boots. But I did do the 2 layers. But any darker brown that you want to use for the sole, you could even do it in the, a black if you'd like to. Okay, so now I'm just using some of my yellowing colors. I'm using my Y38 and my Y13, and I'm just, adding some color into the spurs on his boot. So the Y38 has more of an orangey color tone to it, and then blending it out with my Y13 to make it have a little bit of a little gold, but with that Y38 has the shadowy part to it. And now I'm just adding the colors also to the little, what do you call them? On the buttons, I guess. But on Woody's, they're like a gold type button. So the little dots on his cuffs, and then we're just adding his belt buckle. And we're going to use these same colors also on his shirt, which we're going to do in a few moments. So it's just your Y38, your Y18, and a Y13 that I'm just using in coloring for this area here. And now we're going to go into his shirt. So we're taking Y38 and we're adding in our darkest shadow, so that fold by his elbow and down the one side of the sleeve. And then I'm taking Y18 to blend it out. And then a Y13, which is a really light yellow, just in contrast of the other two, actually. The other ones have that tinge of orange to it, whereas Y13 does not. So back again with that Y38. And then blending it out again with Y18, just to get a fold in his sleeves, and then Y13, blending it all so it's reading yellow and not orange. And then we're going to go ahead and do his other sleeve, which is tucked under his body, so it's a really narrow area. So you just need to lay down basically a line of your Y38, 18, and 13, because it's a really small area that's showing through. And we will be coming back at the end to add the plaid look to the shirt that Woody has in the movie. And we'll do that with colored pencils at the end of the video. So now again, that Y38, just putting in the corners of the shirt where the shadows would be, which is, underneath the vest area and near his waistband. And then fleshing it out with Y18 and Y13. And just again doing 2 layers of this. And I'm just darkening up some of the areas where I think it needed to just show a little bit more shadow, especially the arm that's tucked underneath his body on the side. It would definitely be darker than the other areas. So I just wanted to fix that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on his bandana. I think yes, the bandana. Okay, so for the bandana, I am using R24. Oh, I'm sorry, we're doing his mouth first. Okay, R24, coloring the whole mouth, and then R56, I'm just hitting the 2 sides of his mouth for shadow, and then blending it out again with that R24. And now since we have the R's out, that's why we're going to go ahead and start in on his bandana in a moment. Okay, so now with my R56, I'm going to lay down some folds in the bandana. I'm just drawing them in with my marker where I think it would have creases in it. And then I'm going to take R27 and I'm going to go over those and just extend them out further. So just keep extending them out for it to read red. And then we're taking R24 and finishing it up. So you have a nice little variation of the reds, but you can see folds in the bandana area. And then we're just going to do it again with our darkest colors. This time I'm using R29 in those folds instead of that R59. And then we're going to flush that out with our R27 and then our R24. I don't have, ready-made combos that I use. I just like to pick colors and make them work for what I want. So sometimes I put a layer down, realize it's too light or too dark, and then I'll self-correct on my second layer. Okay, so now that the bandana is done, we're going to go with, oh, I put up the wrong thing here. We're actually going to be doing his pants. And for his pants, we're going to be using some of our blues, and we're starting with our B29. Normally when I do jeans, of course, I use the most famous Copic color blend for denims. But if you look at Woody, Woody is not wearing a traditional denim. His are a little bit more of a royal blue, Crayola, like more of a primary type blue. So I wanted to do that instead of making them look too denim. So I'm using our B29, B28 for my second color, which I'm putting in here now. And then we're going to finish it up with our B18. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I'm using B18 and I'm coloring it up. I already put the second layer, the second color rather. And you're going to see it's more of a true blue than if I was doing the denim color combo. Now we're just going to go ahead and do our second coat. So back with that B29 in the darkest areas. And then our B28. And then our B18. So you have a nice dark to light in the blues, following the same shadow line of the boots that you put on him with everything off to the left-hand side. And the shadow curve should actually kind of match from the pants going into the boot, so you know your extensions are the same length. Okay, so I realized I forgot to color in his belt, so I just grabbed one of the B's that I used on his boots, and I'm just coloring in the little section of his belt there. And then I realized that the buttons on his shirt, in the gold you couldn't see, so I'm just changing them up. I'm just putting a dot of red and making the buttons red on his cuffs now instead of the gold, since his shirt was the same color and you didn't notice them as buttons. Okay, so for finishing touches, I like to use colored pencils and Gamsol. So I just have a black colored pencil. And a lot of the times I don't even put the color of the pencil on the marker. I actually put it on the line of the stamp, which is already black. And then I use my Gamsol and I bleed it out towards the center. If you've never worked using colored pencils and Gamsol before, the most important thing you want to know is the pencil goes a long way. You literally only need to put down a little thin line, and then the Gamsol is going to take it and blend it out, and it blends it a big area out. So don't overuse your colored pencil when you're doing this, because then you're going to end up with just a muddled mess of, the pencil instead of the color. You're just using it here to help darken in the areas for added contrast, which you can also do with your toner markers if you'd like, if you don't use colored pencil. I usually use toner markers or colored pencils a lot of times because I am not one of those people who remember to write down the color markers that I use. Again, it's because I don't have go-to color combinations except for my skin. So if I'm doing hair and I just pull out random colors, or like I did on this hat, I just picked colors that I wanted for the hat and then I put them away. If at the end I look to see that I needed to add a little bit more color to it, I don't remember what colors I had used. So that is why toner markers or the colored pencil trick works for me, because I do put my markers, they're usually in a big pile and I don't write them down when I'm coloring. If you do write down your colors, then you would know, what color to go back to add in those darker areas where you'd like them to be. But I don't, so my bad, but that's just how I am, and I am not going to change. Even if I started to become a little conscious of it, I would probably only remember to do it in one video, and then I'd be right back to the way I normally am, because it's just not in me to write down my colors most of the time. So we're just adding, like I said, the shadows where we want them and where we would be putting them. And it just actually makes more of the pops of color. It actually makes it look more dimensional. Again, a lot of people don't use their toner markers, but this is what they are great for. Once you use the colored pencil and the Gamsol, you cannot self-correct it with Copic markers. Once the Gamsol's down, that's it. You cannot be putting back markers. So that's why, most people will be using toner markers so that they can keep going in there and self-correcting as needed. So I'm just putting the shadows, in the little folds of his arms, in the little folds of the bandana, and it just adds a little bit of added interest to the design. And these are just the regular Prismacolor pencils. I didn't have out my other brand, so this works even with the very popular and commercial based Prismacolored pencils. And just a little bit of Gamsol. And there you have that. And now we're going to take our red colored pencil and we're going to draw in the lines for his plaid shirt. And we're following the direction of his sleeve. So it goes down and then it pivots and turns. So you just want to make sure that you also follow the shape of the fabric of what of his sleeve is going to be. And then also when I'm doing the horizontal lines, I'm not making them straight. I'm doing them in a little bit of a curve, just like the sleeve as well. So you just want to use those as little defining markers so you know the flow to go. You don't want, ruler straight lines. You want them to bow out and you want them to curve. The parts on his belly, you want to, concave them out. I think it's concave is when it goes out. Like like a contact lens, it bows out a little bit. Because of his stomach area. And then again on the horizontal lines, they're not going straight because his body is actually kind of turned. He's not facing you straight on. So you just want to make those lines going in a little bit of a curved direction as well. And we're nearly done here. And the next thing we're going to do is just an option if you want as well, is I like to take a white gel pen and I just put a little dot of the pupil in his eye. Now, this is just the coloring portion of my card. If you'd like to see how I did the Andy Room portion, that is on the Scrapbook Expo YouTube page for one of their demonstrations, and I take you step by step on how to create this adorable background. Thank you.